Yeah, I tell my daughter that all the time. I say, make sure everybody in your school knows that I can fuck every single one of their parents up if I had to.
What is up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in. This is the Scoped Exposure podcast. For all the video people that are watching this, you might notice a bit of a different background. And this is the first real interview episode that I've done since moving back to Alberta. And I'm very excited to be back. There's been a lot of just anyone that moves across the country or has done a long distance move knows that it's a grueling process, multiple weeks of just living out of boxes and being like, where the fuck did I pack this thing? But we got a bit of a setup ready to go. I'm really excited to have it all ready for this interview today. I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of really cool people from Detroit specifically. The people that first come to mind are bands like Annie Up, Enemy of God, Big Deal. We recently had Will from Never Ending Game on the show, and a band that has always been on my radar, but I'm really excited to dig into the lore behind a little bit more is who we're going to be talking to today. So Camden of BLOC joins us on the Scoped Exposure podcast. What's good, Mr. Good?
Hey, what's going on?
I'm very excited to have you on. I think the first time I actually heard about you guys was when you guys did that very short run with friends of Scoped, Rust and Plead back a little while ago. So I was definitely like, who is this band that has a letter and then something attached to it? And then I think over this past year, I've just seen you guys just pop up on people's algorithms and feeds a lot more. And then obviously just with this newest release, I was just really, really vibing. And when you reached out to maybe do an interview, I was like, hell yeah, we got to do it. Camden, before we talk any more hardcore things, we got to check a bev, obviously. So tell the folks at home what you're sipping on for the episode.
Okay, so it took me a while to figure something out. I kind of went back and forth from a few different things, but eventually I settled on a Detroit staple. And with it being starting to get colder here, I chose Fago Red Pop. It tastes like summer. There's something about it. As soon as you smell it, taste it. For me, it reminds me of childhood and my summer.
Right. So you're trying to skip winter and spring and go straight to summer for next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was picking up batteries for the audio recorder, and someone I guess was there was just when you overhear a conversation unintentionally, but someone was, I guess, wearing shorts, and they're like, we're trying to skip winter and go straight to spring. So it's very,
and I'm definitely not the shorts all year guy, but I was dropping my kids off one day the other day and wearing shorts because I go to the gym right after I drop them off.
Of course. Yeah.
And I got the whole, oh, you're a Michigan shorter. And I've never been more offended in my whole life.
You're like, you got me pegged totally wrong here.
Yeah, I'm not that guy.
Yeah, but I feel like everyone knows that one person that went to high school that just wore shorts all year.
Oh yeah,
and not people that live in California or places where it's sunny all year round. It's this is people that it would be just winter domination, and they're still rocking some Adidas shorts.
Right. Yeah, it takes a certain asshole to do that.
Absolutely.
Growing up, we had a guy that would walk to school every single day. It would be snowing, and as soon as school let out, he'd take his shirt off and walk probably 3 miles.
That just pisses me off.
Yeah, it sucks. He's an idiot.
Yeah, I'm cold. Just sign up to what everyone else is subscribed to right now.
Right, absolutely.
Bev-wise for me, just having morning coffee from a local coffee spot here. And since I'm at the tail end of that, mentioning some of the move stuff that I've been up to, I definitely had a lot of liquid death that's been sitting in storage for a long time, and I kind of forgot about it. And I was like, oh my God, I got like multiple dozens of cases to go through. So I'm drinking one of those as well.
Hell yeah.
But Camden, cheers to you, bud. Really excited to finally do this episode.
Cheers.
Might be the first time anyone's checked a fuego on the pot.
It's not just for juggalos.
So Camden, when it comes to like someone who's like kind of newer on our show specifically, I know like you did an episode with Terrazone that I was listening to earlier today, but I'd like to get a little bit of lore about like how people just discover hardcore in general. I think we're both in the I know we're both in the 30-year-old category. I think you have a few years on me. So talk to me about like when you were first discovering hardcore. I know that you've moved around a lot in your life as well. Right. So I'm curious on how that's played a part in getting you on the path that you're on. So yeah, tell me about your first kind of experience with the core.
So my big, I don't know, year-wise, it's kind of ambiguous, right? Like probably late 90s. I'm 37 years old, so I'm a little bit on the upper echelon of 30, and I've got an older brother who was into like skate punk, Fat Rex type stuff, and we had a cousin that would he'd come to Christmas with like a mohawk and stuff, and everybody would fuck with him a little bit, and he would always grab our CD books and flip through them and be like, "This is cool. This sucks. This sucks." And so it was always kind of a competition to see between me and my brother who could impress him more by what we had. And my older brother went like more punk. I went more nu metal. And then through like hanging out with him and skateboarding and stuff with him, nu metal met punk right in the middle at probably like, I don't know, Satisfaction or like Kings of Crime by Scarhead. It was just like the perfect melt of the two. And then it's kind of been nonstop since then.
Right. So, so did you originally, you grew up in, it starts with a D, and it sounds like, we've been doing our yearly watch of all of The Office. So it's Dundee, I think you're originally from? Right.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. It's about 40 minutes south of Detroit.
Right. So, when you were starting to go to stuff there, what was the connection point from like, first hearing the records and then going to see like a local show or band in concert?
So my older brother had started going to shows in Toledo. So from where I grew up, Toledo, Ohio is like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes away. So he started going to shows there. And at the time I was probably in like, I think he was just got his license. So I was probably in 7th grade. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of weird with my parents. They didn't know anything about it. And there wasn't like this big, massive eye on what hardcore is or what punk is that there is today, right. So they couldn't just YouTube something and see what we were going to. So they see these bars and stuff that my older brother was going to at 16 and like the sketchy parts of Toledo. And they're like, no way is our 12, 13-year-old son going with him.
Right.
But eventually there was like, I think it was Less Than Jake was headlining, and there's like 3 other bands, and then Newfound Glory was opening. At the time, A Newfound Glory. And
they had before they dropped it? Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I've got like t-shirts that say A Newfound Glory on them. But yeah, so I went to that with him, and it was kind of, I made it back alive. And then it was kind of, my parents just trusted us to go down there. And it wasn't until about, I don't know, sophomore year, or well, probably not sophomore year, probably junior year of high school, that the Detroit scene even was a thing for us to go to, which probably would have been like 2002, 2001, something like that.
So, talk to me about like so you start to go to some of these shows, you kind of get like the itch. Did you start playing in bands immediately, or did that come like later in life for you?
So when I was like, I don't know, 14, something like that, I bought a bass guitar because it seemed like the obvious, I'm a caveman. four strings easier than six strings.
Sure.
So I started playing in like a pop punk cover band. And we did stupid songs, we did like Neil Diamond, Cherry Cherry, and like, and we had like a pig roast at our school where it's like a big, huge barbecue that everybody kind of hangs out at. And like, if I could look at it now, it's probably the most embarrassing thing I've ever done in my life. But like, we played like five cover songs in my older brother's band, who was actually wrote their own songs and doing halfway decent at the time. They played after us. And then I figured out pretty shortly into trying to start like a metalcore band with my older brother that I can't play the bass very well. So then it just kind of happened that I fell into singing in that band. And that band did absolutely nothing. We played like maybe 4 or 5 okay shows. We played with like Dead to Fall and Chiodos and a couple of those kind of bands.
Wow.
This is like pre Chiodos doing anything. Right. So it's not like this huge thing we did.
Right.
But then shortly after that, I ended up moving away, joining the military, going down to North Carolina. And then it was kind of that work was all I was there for. I was going to shows, still doing all that stuff, but I played in a couple bands here and there that played local shows. But this is really, whenever anybody asks, this is the first like serious thing I've ever done.
Yeah. And like you were mentioning you got to like do a couple of like local things when you were down in North Carolina, or was it like strictly like I'm just here kind of for work stuff, like you were saying?
No, we did. I mean, I was down there for like 8 years, something like that. So I mean, eventually, I'm an air traffic controller.
Yeah.
So when you get there, it's strictly like you're here to learn. You know what I mean? You're here to do this job. This is what you breathe for the year or whatever until you gain ratings and stuff like that. So when I first got down there, I didn't know anybody. I ended up meeting somebody through, excuse me.
You're good.
There's a girl that lived down there that was friends with a kid I worked with. And she happened to be friends with somebody that was big into like the Wilmington, North Carolina hardcore scene. And I wore like a Terror sweatshirt or something. And then she's like, oh, my boyfriend knows Terror. And so I got to know him, and then I got to know everybody down there. So that kind of springboarded me into where shows are and stuff down there.
Yeah. It's so crazy how like there's infinite amounts of stories off of like, I just wore this one shirt this day and that connected to the person that, like this is like maybe this is like very adult sounding, but I was at the doctor's yesterday getting an iron infusion because I'm iron deficient, and some dude wearing like a Testament shirt is walking by me. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, because it's at least like we're somewhat on the same wavelength at the very least. And I was wearing a Speed shirt, and he like stopped and he was like, what is that? What is that? And then I was like, oh, like Speed. It's like this great band from Australia. Like, I'm like, you might like them. Like you kind of know it. And so, it's just enough of like a conversation starter at the very least. So,
when I got out of military, I needed a job or whatever. So I started working at Best Buy. Coming from working a pretty prestigious job in the military into working at Best Buy, nothing against Best Buy, but like I was up here and then having to take what I felt was a worse job just to get some cash until I got a new job. And they tell you they're like, make a connection with the people. You know what I mean? If you see somebody and they're wearing a shirt, talk to them about it. So this is one of the most, I don't know, it's probably not that embarrassing, but to me it was embarrassing at the time. This middle-aged woman came in and she had a Citizen shirt on. This is in Toledo, so it's not like abnormal to see that.
Right.
So I said, hey, like, I like your shirt. I'm good friends with their singer, Matt. And she said, oh, my sons play in that band. And I'm like, oh, who are your sons? It was Eric and Nick Ham's mom.
Oh, wow.
Who
so funny.
Was good friends with my wife. And so she's like, oh, what's your name? Like, oh, I'm Camden. And she's like, oh, I know your wife. We love your wife. And I'm like, I went from like, oh, I'm just kind of talking to this lady to like, now she thinks that that my wife's husband just works at Best Buy. And I'm like, there's more to it than that. And I can't like explain it to her. And so I very rarely will approach somebody on a shirt anymore.
Yeah. You're like, unless it's like, I feel like unless it's something that's so obscure, like how do you know about this band? Like, you know, like you kind of feel, at least for me, when I was first getting into it, I would always get like a little obsessed on like finding something that was like very, very niche. But then when I would find someone else who also, you know, rep the shirt at a fest, I'm like, how do you know about this band from Manchester? Or how do you know about this band? So, but yeah, sometimes it's like when it's more, I guess, like a bigger name act that's in the wild, like you kind of have to like flip a coin whether you're going to gamble that at times.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit because, you know, there's a lot of life that you've lived, obviously, but like I want to kind of get to the point of like when BLOC is starting. You know, so talk to me about like the initial idea of like that. Were there any like, I guess, thoughts just because you're getting later in life and you have kids, you're like, are we going to do this really, really seriously? Or is it just kind of be like for shits and gigs on the weekends? Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I want to say the idea probably started, I was in Europe with Annie Up and I was just kind of going over, like talking to some of those guys like, oh, this is something I think we could do, you know, and then everybody's busy. It kind of goes away. Then it stayed in my head. You know what I mean? Like I was just like, I could do this. I can do this. I can do this. But then finding people because like you said, from me moving around a lot, there's people that know me from this part of my life, this part of my life, that part of my life. And I moved away from here at 21 years old. So when I moved away in 2007, I won't say none of, but most of the people that are involved in bands today were like in middle school, you know? So coming back here and trying to find people to start a band with was kind of like never going to happen. I mean, we approached everybody you can think of to do the band. It is funny. It's kind of running joke of how many people turned it down. You know what I mean? Like we had our original drummer. I'm very like, I don't want to call it, I don't know if it's pride, what it is, but like, I'm not the guy that can just like go up and be like, hey, do you want to do a band with me? Do you want to do a band with me? Specifically because I'm going to do vocals in the band, right? Like if I played guitar, it'd be easy for me to be like, hey, I'm starting this band. I have these ideas. Let's go with it. It's me relatively no, you know, resume saying, hey, I want to do this band. Will you write stuff for me?
Yeah, it becomes more of like not like you're hiring someone for the job, but you're kind of, it's almost similar of like, I have this like startup idea, but I need people to like fill the seats and do some of the work behind it. Which is like, you know, I've been on both sides of the coin and sometimes it works, but I understand how that could be daunting at times to be like,
and plus like posting, like say you post on Facebook and you're like, hey, I'm trying to start a band in the vein of this, like who wants to play? And then nobody replies. That like kills me. You know what I mean? It's like now everybody knows I'm a loser.
We've all seen that, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not that guy. But the guy that was originally playing drums for us is that guy. He has I don't know if it's some form of like autism or Asperger's or something, but he like would post daily. I'm starting this band. Who wants to play in it? And nobody would reply. He messaged everybody. I mean, he messaged Joe Plonky. He messaged everybody from every band you can think of in Detroit to be like, hey, do you want to do this band? But again, if you say, hey, it's this guy that hasn't lived here in 15 years and me, nobody's signing up.
Right. Yeah, so and that becomes like when you start to go down the list and, you know, people are like, hey, like, I got too much on my plate. I don't know if it's my vibe. And then you start to run out of the names. You're like, fuck, am I going to have like, how, like, dip into other states to like ask people to do this? Like,
absolutely.
Like,
and that kind of was how it started, right? There's a band from St. Louis called The Death and a Promise that one of my old bands toured with. And their guitar player was going to start playing. Me and him wrote some stuff that never went anywhere. But then we had this kid. We've had a couple of people come to practices, and would play for a little bit and then just never answer another message.
Right.
But eventually we had a kid come, his name was Anthony, and he didn't have any gear though. He had like an Epiphone Les Paul that he dropped on the floor the first day of practice and broke the tuning forks off. And he had a practice amp, like a 110, 25 watt practice amp. And we would sit there and we'd mess around with stuff. So by the time we actually went into the studio to record the first EP, we had never played those songs before. Like we played them obviously, but like never heard them because you can't hear a 25 watt amp over a full drum set.
Right.
And I'm definitely not doing vocals over a tiny little amp, you know?
Yeah.
So going in, I had no clue how any of those songs were going to sound. The guitars were so bad in there because, like I said, his tuning forks were all broke off of his guitar. That Matt from Citizen ended up re-recording all the guitars, all the bass, everything for it. So it's him playing on the record, not the guy that was playing guitar.
Gotcha.
But the day that kid walked out of the studio after recording his parts, I'm telling you, probably like on the road, he texted me and was like, "Hey man, I can't do the band anymore." So now we have a 5-song EP demo, whatever you want to call it, that we're going to put out, but nothing.
No line, you know no complete lineup.
Band.
Yeah.
We've got a bass player, a drummer, and me. So luckily, Rich, who's our guitar player now, has been a friend of mine since before I left for the military. And he was at the time playing in Annie Up, and he had just quit playing for them. And I had sent him the recordings, and he was like, "Yo, these are really good, but there's some things if I was in the band I would change." He's like, "But I don't feel comfortable like telling you what I would change." And I'm like, "Well, why don't you just join the band and you could change whatever you want." And so he's like, "Okay, yeah, we can do that."
Yeah.
And so he joined the band, and then our bass player at the time, I don't know if he realized like we're kind of above his his skill level. You know what I mean? Like he was just kind of bowed out gracefully. We're still good friends with him, but he was like, "I don't think this is for me anymore." And then luckily we got Matt to come play. Matt Slawick, our bass player now, came in right away, filled in awesome, playing guitar. Then we went in, recorded the second record. And then right after the second record was done, we played maybe 2 shows and then parted ways with that drummer for several different reasons. Most of them being the no pride stuff. You know what I mean? Like he would just openly talk about anything and everything. And I was like, "Okay, man, we it's not working out." And then we got this guy, Austin, who he sings in that band Normal. They're kind of like a shoegaze indie type band. But at the time he was playing in like 5 other bands. So it kind of seemed like, I don't know if he'll actually do it or if he'll stick around or maybe just play a couple shows.
Yeah.
And then our guitar player Lyric, who plays bass in Enemy of God, they joined the band, and it just it was like the first time that it felt like an actual whole thing.
Right. And that can be like I'm speaking from experience as well, because like my own band Endgame, like we've gone through the ringer of different members, and it's never been, I would say 90% of the time it's always been like mutual, just people have other things going on in their lives, things with the band just got a little bit busier,
right?
And nothing aside from maybe like one instance was like, this dude sucks, he shouldn't be in the band anymore.
Yeah.
But that being said, like in the midst of transition, it can feel sometimes both exciting and like, fuck, or like, you know, it's no different than if you're running a business and like one person quits and then you're worried about like the other people like kind of getting kind of in a, not like we're going to push through kind of mindset, like, oh fuck, like what are we going to do? Is that kind of it? But you know, sometimes when you do have that, I guess, new idea of someone else entering and bringing in a breath of fresh air, that can really go a long way. And that's like literally in the mix of what I'm up to. But kind of fast forwarding a bit now, I guess like a more general question I had to ask is like, you know, I think when a band like BLOC, for example, is like, I've looked at a lot of articles or people talk about you as like, one of the new up and coming acts in the Detroit scene. And I'm just kind of curious on someone who's like, obviously a lot older in life, where it's like, being, when you hear up and coming, you think of people in their, in their teen years and stuff like that. So I'm kind of curious if that's like kind of a when you hear that, it's like, I've been around, but it's just like I've had other things going on in my life. Or is that something that you just like, the accolades is cool by you and you just rock with it?
Yeah, it's a little of both. So I remember we played very early on in the band with Pain of Truth on their first tour, and I remember talking to Zach, and he was like, "We're kind of the same age, right?" And I'm like, I don't think so, man. Like, I'm a little bit older.
You're like plus 10, maybe.
Yeah. And I don't know. I take it as kind of like a compliment, right? Because maybe it means I don't look like an old man. I don't act like an old man. But I mean, we are a new band. We do have young people in the band. I mean, we range, right? Like I'm 37. I think Rich is 36. Matt is 32. And then Austin and Lyric are in their early mid 20s. So there is an eclectic group of ages there. But no, I don't. I mean, it's weird, like getting into like conversations with people when they say like, "Oh, this band was the first one to do it here," and it's like, no, they're not.
Incorrect.
Like, let me explain to you this, and then I feel like, not that I'm talking down, but like I'm like preaching to somebody that this is how it should be as opposed to how it is,
Right.
But the good thing is I've been around enough to see how it was in the things that I didn't like. Detroit has historically, from my vantage point, always been like a dog eat dog scene, right? Where you have different generations of bands, and the generation before never fucks with the generation after it. There's, I don't know if they feel like their legacy is being tarnished by the band coming in, but there's always been some kind of weird beef between the generational bands. And then coming in as somebody that is from the generation before us, or maybe two ahead of us, and being with the generation in front of us, we're trying to do, and I think we're doing a pretty decent job of making sure everybody's involved, supporting the younger bands, supporting the legacy acts, making sure that everybody gets their roses whenever they can.
Right. Yeah.
But
And
I don't know.
I feel like that is, I think that's a sentiment that's probably felt in a lot of different scenes and to varying degrees for sure. But I do think that we are kind of in an age now where I remember when Jay from Mind Force, he's been on the show a couple times, and he was always saying how like he always thought that the younger kids weren't going to fuck with the band because they were a lot older as well.
Right.
But and then we see bands like Broken Vow, who are just like in I'm like 10 years older than a lot of those kids,
Right.
but they're just like making people in the 30-year-old age bracket like mosh as hard as the 18-year-old. So
absolutely,
I think it's like a very like hardcore is an interesting thing where it is important to know someone's age, but that's not a deciding factor whether you're gonna like fuck with them or chill with them or like connect with them at the very least.
Right. And I'm sure it's clear now, but like I want to say it that I'm not a 37-year-old guy that got into hardcore 2 weeks ago. You know what I'm saying? Like I've been there. I've seen it. You know what I mean? I'm not a new guy.
Yeah. Since we're on that topic, like you were mentioning on like things that you either didn't like about the scene or wanted to see improve or change. What do you think has been the biggest thing that you've seen? And you can either say this generally speaking or in Detroit specifically. What do you think has been the best change in hardcore in the time that you've been involved?
Well, people being at shows is great.
That's good.
There's been times where there's been insane shows, pre-pandemic stuff, right? Of course, and there would be 4 people there. You know what I mean? But now we've had, I think last year they did a 10 for 10 in Detroit. They had all local bands. and it sold out. You know what I mean? Like the amount of support that's there for a local band, as opposed to just, oh, terrors come to town, everybody come to a show.
Right.
I think that's insane right now, especially here. I'm, speaking strictly for Detroit, the way that everybody supports the local bands, and it's incredible.
So speaking of like dope shit that's happening in Detroit, obviously like Tied Down is something that is just crushing it, especially in the last few years of it's happening.
Right.
The festivities of this past year, like, were absolutely insane. I unfortunately didn't get the pleasure of going, but I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of like the clips and just like seeing a lot of of my friends being down there having an absolute blast. I feel like we have to talk about the D-Block Little Caesars kind of fiasco.
Yeah.
And what was crazy to me is like, obviously I saw the clip when it was first posted by Sonny, but when I went to go watch the full set of that, I realized that that's like at the very beginning of the set. That's not like something that was like right in the middle or at the end. So I don't know if we're trying to keep Mr. Pizza like
No.
anonymous, but yeah, like talk to me about like the lore behind that.
So off the bat, the guy in the costume his name's Jimmy Galeros. He just started a record label called Top Floor Tapes. So shout out to those guys. But he texts me, I don't know, maybe an hour or two before I left to go load in for the show. And we were talking, just joking around about sponsorships. And he works for like a Little Caesars franchise, the guy that buys a bunch of Little Caesars and stuff, and they were running the Little Caesars food truck at the fest. So I was like, yo, get us a Little Caesars sponsorship. Like I'll wear whole Little Caesars get up, just give me free pizza. And he's like, dude, do you want me to bring the suit? And I'm like, at first I said no. I'm like,
you first said no?
Yeah, well, in my head, right? I never told him no, but I was like, I was thinking, I was like, I don't want to be like a gimmick band.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That's not something, and I don't want it to, my fear was that it was going to be the whole set, right? He said, I want to get on stage during this song. I knew we played that song first. So I'm like, I don't want him to be up there the whole time, and then it to be like,
people just making pizza jokes the whole set.
Yeah, and we're the Little Caesars band, and it's just like, so eventually I was just like, fuck it, like if you can get it, let's run it, And so he came up and was like, I got it, we're good to go. And honestly, like I didn't even realize he was on the stage until like after that first, whatever you want to call it, chorus, whatever. And I turned around and walked back. It was the first time I seen him on stage. And then it worked out perfect for him because he's up there. I mean, it's hot as fuck in there. And I can only imagine if you're wearing this humongous
like
costume.
Pizza oven temperature wise.
Yeah. Yeah. So he ends up like, after we did it, he left and took off the costume behind the stage. And then you see him, if you watch the whole video, he's wearing like a D-Block jersey with, I think, a red shirt underneath it. He's moshing the whole rest of the show out there. But
yeah, I did. Yeah. I understand who you're speaking of. Yeah. I saw that dude. Yeah.
And like, I guess I didn't realize the gravity of anything, I was just like, oh, that'll be a funny, like 2-second thing. And then like, as soon as I sat down at the table, like I seen Sonny posted it on his reel, and we were getting tagged and stuff. And I was like, damn, like that, that might've been the smartest decision that we never made.
Right. And like, you saying pizza motherfucker is like one of the best things I've heard all year as well. So
I definitely scripted that. Like I knew he was getting up there, and I told everybody, like, I think I'm gonna say this as a joke. And then I said it. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like you probably like reinvigorated like the interest of like Little Caesars, because like I'm probably one of those people that like swore by it when it was like a $5 medium pizza, but then when they did $5.99, I was like mentally like fuck you, because and just I think this was just a younger Spencer, but I don't even know what a medium like pie at Little Caesars even goes for nowadays. It's probably like, just with inflation, it's probably like $8 or $9.
If you don't get the hot and ready, It's not. I don't think it's the cheapest thing. But I'm a firm believer, right? Like I'm sure you've seen like the fuck around, find out scale on the internet. There's a cost to like tastiness ratio of pizza, and like $5 for a large Little Caesars pizza is great. You know what I mean? It's not a good pizza. It's a very, very mid pizza.
Right.
But for $5, you're not going to get a better one.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to accept today is a mid pizza day.
I mean, I'm with it.
Yeah. And then you can appreciate the like knock it out of the park pizzas that you pay $20 to $25.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't pay $20 for large pizza every time you go out.
Yeah. It's too much.
I do know I guess I'm going to say I know for a fact, but I don't know if this is true. We got the amount of times we got tagged in like Little Caesars posts right after that, like the weekend after that show. Like I'm sure they got maybe a little tiny spike in sales. So we will take the sponsorship whenever they're ready to hand it out.
Yeah. You heard it here first. It just like, because like my background's in like marketing and all that shit. Like there's someone on the Little Caesars social or marketing team who's like has to go through the accounts and has probably seen that clip dozens of times. So. And they've been like, hey boss, is there anything we can do with this? And you're like, people are fighting on stage at this fest. Like, I don't know. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's not going to be a good commercial for them.
Yeah. And to my knowledge, there's not really any other cool, like, pizza mascots that would be dope to, like, to have.
There's the Noid.
The Noid?
Yeah, I think it's Domino's, the Domino's pizza mascot's the Noid.
Okay.
You got to avoid the Noid.
Oh, okay.
No, it's like this. I think it's Domino's, and I might be speaking out of pocket, and it might be, but I think it's Domino's. It's like a weird alien with like,
oh yeah,
like red bunny ears. But that was like 80s.
Oh, yeah, in the 80s, and then they revived it in 2021.
Yeah, I think there's video games about it too, like Sega Genesis games about them. And then Jets has the rocket ship guy. So there's a few.
You could do a whole band of all these pizza mascots.
I know. We had a debate the other day at the Coldest Life show on who would win in a fight between Little Caesar or the Jets pizza guy. Is pretty right down the middle split.
it was a very polar. It was a 50-50.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the new BLOC release.
Yeah.
So you guys like the Do Not Cross like EP was really, really awesome, but I feel like this was just like everything. Like sometimes you need like a really good release to like really showcase and have a layup to like a really great release as well. And sometimes doing that back to back is very, very challenging. But talk to me about the recording aspect, what went into the writing, what you feel you guys want to do a little bit differently or like kind of dig your heels on when it came to this next chapter for the band.
Yeah, so we recorded it with Colin from 19 Stars, who played drums in Purgatory and plays bass in Days Lost now. We went down there, spent I think 3 days or something recording with him. We did everything in the first day. The rest of the other 2 days were just hanging out and eating food. But I mean, it kind of, I don't know if there's anything really different other than, so we recorded the first 2 records with Matt from Citizen, who is into hardcore. Like, I'm not going to say he's not into hardcore or anything like that, but Colin is like plays in hardcore bands, like does all that shit, tours like that. So going and working with somebody that knows that, again, not saying Matt doesn't know that, but yeah, I think that added a lot. Having the new drummer on this is the first recordings he's been on was great. Everybody knew like tonally what they wanted. It was super painless. I mean, Austin, the drummer, like did one take for every single drum thing, was in and out of drums. We went to go get breakfast. So me and Rich, the guitar player, left to go get just run to McDonald's right down the road and bring food back for everybody. And by the time we got back, he was almost done recording all the drums.
That's so fucked up.
It was stupid. And then everything was so fast. And we left halfway through recording it to go to a party, to go to our friend Matt's daughter's first birthday party, and still finished everything in a day. probably one of the best experiences recording wise that we've ever had.
Yeah. It's not that I love to romanticize about the idea of like being in an Airbnb in the woods and like spending a whole week writing a bunch of
Yeah.
music and doing all that. But like, I don't know. I'm just at a place in my life where my time is very, very stripped between a lot of different responsibilities. So like,
Right.
I love the idea of just like crushing out a killer record like that within a weekend. And some of that is like being like prepared and not like dicking around half the time and
Yeah.
being like, oh, how's this part gonna go? What should we do this? I don't know about this fill. Like, if you come ultra prepared, you could definitely do that. But like having a talented, engineer like Colin, and he's like very meticulous when it comes to how things can be as heavy as possible.
Right.
We
Absolutely.
talked a lot about that when he was on the podcast. But like, I'm a big fan of like Matt's like songwriting as well. He's been on the pod.
Yeah.
That man can cook up some heavy shit as
absolutely.
well. Like Crypt. That's
great.
That's fucking
Unreal.
crazy. But yeah, like I love the idea of just being able to like take a weekend and just, eat some McDonald's and put together some good tracks.
Well, and that's like the only way we can do it, right? Because I mean, I have 3 kids. Our bass player has 3 kids. We all have full-time jobs that we do. So like even like getting time to play shows is hard. Let alone taking 3 days and being like, hey, we're going to go stay at a hotel and record.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of a hard sell, especially to somebody that has to stay home and take care of all the kids. But so, I mean, that was the only option for that.
Right.
But we have definitely kicked around the idea of like, because again, talking like to Matt and stuff like that about how they wrote and recorded their records. And I'm like, dude, and I asked everybody in the band, I'm like, do you think it would be like good for us if we got an Airbnb somewhere in the woods and just stayed there for 3 or 4 days and just like wrote and perfected everything? And it was kind of mixed reviews. Some people like, I can't write like that. Other people like, I think that would be the best thing we could do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's funny because going into recording that, Austin is like, our drummer is very, he worries, right? So he's like, I don't think we're ready. I don't think we're ready to record. I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I know these parts. And then goes in, like I said, in an hour and does absolutely everything first try. Mm-hmm. It's like, you were the only one that was worried. And you're the only one that killed it.
Yeah. Like, I feel like I'm at a point now, and I don't know if you could relate to this, where it's like more about like hedging or like picking out like different milestones like that, and kind of just like, if it happens, it happens. But like, back in the day when I was like first getting into like heavy music in general, it was like I wanted to do everything. I wanted to tour 300 days of the year. I wanted to do all these like, different things. I would watch bands. It's not that, it's just like life gets in the way. It's not just about that. It's just like, oh, maybe that's just not for me specifically. I like the idea of like being able to like go out and do that. But like you said, like even in my writing style, I'm very much like a visionary when it comes to everything. So like once I'm bringing something to the table, in my eyes, it should be pretty much like already 80 to 90% done.
Correct.
Because I've spent like 100 hours on one song specifically.
Yeah.
Versus like, and there are some times where, you'll write a riff and you can just finish that song within an hour if you just have the time at a jam spot.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's if you can make the time, you should definitely do it to just have that experience. But I think you should have a bit, ask yourself those questions. Like, do I really need to be out in the woods to make a banger record, or can I just like DIY it in my bedroom, in my apartment? That's cool too.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to do it. And like we going into things, we typically don't demo anything out aside from like a scratch guitar track on like drum machines, like simple drums, just to get like tempos and stuff like that. So going into any of that stuff, nobody knows how the vocal patterns go, how any of that stuff is going to go. So even like coming up with like background vocals, gang vocals, stuff like that, it was all pretty on the spot.
Mm. So talk to me about like, I guess your vocal writing style. I know like in, there was like a No Echo article where you're talking about the last EP, you had a quote on there that I thought was really interesting where you're saying every word that we say on the EP is a life lesson. And I would like to think that that is something that carries over to a new record as well, versus
Right.
like, no, this is, I want to go back on everything I said before. So I guess I'm curious about your outlook when it comes to the lyrics that you write, and like how you want to like add that extra meaning to the music side of things.
Yeah, definitely every song that we've written lyrically is true, right? Every single thing that I've said has happened. Every person I said fuck you to on the record, I mean fuck you to in real life. Mm-hmm. There's several situations where I don't want to say it's never come back to bite me in the ass, let's be honest with you. But like where I've thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't say that, or maybe I shouldn't be so obvious with what I'm saying. And then the kind of weird balance of keeping it specific to me and yet making it relatable to anybody else, where they can go, oh, I've felt that. I know what it feels like to have a friend or a significant other or somebody fuck you over so bad that this is what you want to do.
Right.
So I don't know if that answers the question or
no,
or
yeah,
not,
it definitely does. And like, like I've talked about it a few times, but like I've kind of moved from guitar in Endgame to the vocal side of things, and I've had that similar struggle where I get like ultra specific, like right off the bat, but then I have to pull myself back and broaden it a little bit. So it's like I still, because I love when people can be very creative about the disses that they might want to like splinter into a song, but they, it shouldn't just be overarching, like so obvious that song is about so and so, because like adding a little bit of mystery is kind of, it's the same way of like, you listen to a Taylor Swift song, you're like, oh, which ex-boyfriend is this about? I don't know.
Yeah, if you know who they're about, it's super obvious. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If you know any of the story about any of the songs, it's so obvious that it could be uncomfortable, mm-hmm. But I remember writing when I wrote The Fixer, I was sitting at work and I was like just doodling some stuff down. And then I remember writing like a note, because I still write on a notepad. And I wrote like in parentheses, like, you need to be more specific, like get into it. And I don't know if I did that on the song or not, but I told myself to do it. So
yeah. So you and I are almost the opposite, where you might broaden it and then you need to narrow down a little bit.
I think so. At least on that song I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think have there been any songs on this EP or not that have been like more challenging for you to write? Or do you think that everything kind of streams together pretty naturally?
So when we did the original, I don't know, when I originally wrote the words for One of Us, it was a completely different song. Mm-hmm. Everything about it was different. Then we had some things happen that made me go, okay, I think this needs to be addressed. And then I remember driving down home from work and listening to Vampire by Olivia Rodrigo. And I don't know what happened, but I just like put that thing on repeat. Like I'm driving, I'm going like 80 miles an hour down the highway. And my car has like adaptive cruise and lane assist, so it kind of drives itself.
Right.
And I just repeated that song and just sat there and typed out the lyrics right there. And within like 15 minutes, just listening to Olivia Rodrigo and completely changed the song.
Interesting.
And I think for the better, because I think what I had in there will probably be on a different song.
Gotcha.
But I think it came out much better than it should have.
Yeah. I never expected Olivia Rodrigo to influence a D-Block track in some way. That's not on my bingo
brag
card.
Here. Okay. I may or may not be in the top 1% of Olivia Rodrigo listeners worldwide, according to Spotify.
According to Spotify.
Yeah.
Is that on your rap this year?
That is.
Damn.
It was. I get a notification like a couple years ago. It said like you're in the top 1% of Hatebreed listeners, and then this year or whatever, it was the top 1% of Olivia Rodrigo listeners.
That's a huge arm span.
It's a milestone in my life.
I know the obvious answer of like what's more likely to happen is like D-Block playing with Hatebreed maybe one day, but any hardcore band even being on Olivia Rodrigo's radar, it should be D-Block for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna start like sending her letters and t-shirts in the mail and stuff. So anybody that's lucky enough to have the name Olivia Rodrigo somewhere in the yellow pages is going to be getting a free D-Block shirt.
All right, so Camden, I want to talk about, number one D-Block fan, your daughter Eden. It's funny, seeing people who are, dads of the scene, and they'll post crazy photos from shows, and then have like the family weekend on their feed as well. I think it's very wholesome to kind of see the duality of those things. But on a more serious note, I am always curious because hardcore for me, being someone without kids, I definitely attribute a lot of the life lessons, the way I look at aspects of my career and how I can better myself. I feel like without hardcore, I think I would be in a worser spot. So I'm kind of curious from your angle if there's been anything that hardcore has done for you when it comes to being a father, or how you've gone about parenting. You have 2 kids at this point.
I got 3.
You
now.
have 3. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
You're just cooking out riffs and kids.
no riffs, and no more kids. So
yeah.
But no, I mean, it's definitely affected my whole life, right? So obviously everything that I do, from the way my work ethic at work to how I drive my car, is affected by hardcore in general. It's kind of a weird balance, right, of trying to parent your kids as like a normal parent, and like somebody that grew up in a more violent subculture, to where like, you hear like my daughter's like, oh, so and so pushed me or something like that. It's like, well, punch him in the fucking head then. You know what I mean? But like, society tends to frown on that.
Right.
Yeah, it's like okay, how should I act as me versus how I should act towards my, with my kids and the advice that I give them. But it's great as far as like, I mean, we go on vacations all over the place, right? And no matter where we go, there's somebody that they know. You know what I mean? Like, they have an uncle. If we were to go to London, they have uncles in London. They have uncles everywhere, So it's like, it's cool on that side, because there's all these different connections, even with their kids now, where she has friends all over the world. She's 7 years old, and we're playing tonight with Pain of Truth. So right after I get done here, I got to drive and start getting all the stuff ready for that. But I'm bringing her with me to the show.
Oh, okay.
And she's like, because last time she came to a show, I kind of made like, this is my daughter Eden kind of speech, and she's like, are you going to do that again? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to make it different. I'm going to say that this is my daughter Eden, and she's been going to shows way longer than almost everybody in this room. And like, I went through the damn my Instagram finding, like, dude, she went to see Citizen in Syracuse, New York, 2 days before she was born. She went and seen them in Brooklyn 2 months after she was born. Like, so she's been going to shows steady for 7 years,
Lots of Citizen, just lots of those tunes in the womb.
That's an easy one for her to go to. She still gets kind of weirded out, I guess, when she sees videos of people jumping on me, and as I would assume most kids would.
Right.
And it's weird too, because like, again, it's so now hardcore is kind of in the public eye, right? There's no really hiding it. So I have like, she'll come home and say, oh, so their dad watched your video on YouTube. And then it's like, okay, so now, you know what I mean? And like, our lyrics aren't super small town friendly. You know what I mean? So now it's like, okay, hopefully people don't see that and go, I don't want my kid to hang out with her because her dad does this,
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of a weird balancing act between the two things.
Yeah. Which is like, I've never really thought of it that way, where it's like the art that you're making and like the things that you're expressing like are like a weird, it's an excuse for someone to like take this like morally high road of being like a conservative, like, but for lack of a better term, just to be like, oh, I'm, so-and-so's like more in this. So it's like, well, like a lot of like you know, a lot of people who are in those spaces of being a parent, like they don't find those outlets to be able to express themselves. And that could be
Right.
through anything, but like there, you know, to your credit, there is a weird thing because, you know, sometimes I really believe that we as a society could be a little bit better off if punching someone in the face wasn't just like assault at this,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, like,
Absolutely.
right. Because like a lot,
Because some
like
people need it.
some
Let's
people,
be
like
honest.
lots of people need it.
Yeah.
And like,
Absolutely.
and that ranges from people in their 50s to like 13-year-olds who like don't know better, who are just running
Yeah.
their mouth on the internet. But you know, we're not there as a society to like embrace that. So, you know, when hardcore, you know, maybe leans a little bit more that way, that can be off-putting. So
Right. Right.
that's an interesting struggle that, you know, I'm sure you're not solely unique to, but is pretty unique
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of
When
parents.
even the most, I don't know, I understand like the song like 10999, right? I understand parents not liking that, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But like even if you watch like, I don't know, let's just use The Fixer as an example, right?
Mhm.
It's not wholesome whatsoever, right? But everybody's experienced that in their life.
Mhm.
But you could take that and just watch the reaction of people. And no matter what I say, it's gonna be like, oh, I don't want anybody around that, you know?
Right.
So and I can't blame anybody for feeling that way.
Yeah.
But I am a good dad and I am nice. So
Of course. Yeah, yeah. Like I feel like there's a lot of you know, people that will just like judge and fear what they don't know. And
absolutely.
you know, it's very important for me when there's people that I might know of through, you know, music or like different things when even if they're like huge A-list celebrities, when they go on a certain podcast and it's a little bit when you actually hear aspects of people's lives, their struggles, like it kind of like
Right.
all puts us on the exact same page again. And I feel like a lot of people don't entertain the idea to at least like humble themselves to be like, hey, maybe I don't know
Sure.
everything about this person. That just goes straight to the judgment train of it.
You know,
So
and we've definitely had the other side of it too, where people that like go to school with my son will come, or their kids go to school with my son will come up and be like, hey, we seen you wearing a D-Block shirt, like, and we went and listened to it and we really like it now. So we've had that as well.
yeah,
It's
of
not
course.
all parents hating it.
Yeah, yeah. And if anything, it's like kind of cool to be like, I'm the coolest dad who's picking up the kids from
Absolutely.
school.
Yeah, I tell my daughter that all the time. I say, make sure everybody in your school knows that I can fuck every single one of their parents up if I need to.
Let it be known from
Yeah.
the rooftops. What, in your opinion, is the best song off the Eden punk rock playlist on your Spotify?
I'll be honest with you, I don't remember a whole lot on there. It's got like Bad Cop on there, right?
Yeah, there's two of those
That's
tracks.
great. That's great. Honestly, like she has her own like actual playlist with like songs she likes, and then I like
Oh,
started
so this
adding
isn't
stuff
like a
to that
curated
one.
from your. This might be like a shared
No,
thing.
this is well, they're all those songs are on her actual playlist, but I started making that one first, and then I was like, let's just make one playlist instead of having to go back and forth.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, her playlist, like, so we played Sweatfest in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is like a 3-hour drive from us. We drove about halfway there. Then Rich realized he forgot all his pedals. So we had to drive all the way back and then all the way back. But I think on that whole drive, we listened to her playlist the entire time.
Dang.
And it's got everything. It's got, I got Olivia Rodrigo on there. I've got songs from Sing, from every Disney movie. It's just bangers left and right.
Right. Is there any either like childhood movies that pain you that she doesn't like, that are like really important to you? Have there been anything that it like has crushed you that she has not picked up on it? At least right yet.
Not really.
Okay.
She's super. So the one that like, I love Pee Wee Herman.
Okay.
So like but both my kids love Pee Wee Herman. They even like the one from like, I think is 84, the Pee Wee's Big Adventure. They watched that one after having watched like the new one on Netflix and still like that one. And my daughter's super into like Nightmare Before Christmas and Coraline and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So like that's not something I grew up on Nightmare Before Christmas or anything like that, but it's still cool that she's like finding things on her own and
Right. But can still appreciate, some classics as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple other things I want to ask you about, Camden. What's the story behind there's a blanket of you naked in a cowboy hat that you gave as a Christmas present? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna say I don't still do it, but there was a year where for every holiday, my parents are like over the top with everything holiday wise. So like they have like an Easter bunny costume and a Santa Claus costume and all these costumes. So I thought it'd be funny if I took naked pictures of myself wearing like the Easter bunny head or the Santa Claus beard and posting it on my stories for the holiday, or sending them out as Christmas cards.
Right.
So the cowboy hat one was me and Critter from that sings for Annie Up. We're texting each other. We were going to a barbecue down in Hocking Hills, Ohio. And we were joking around about how we're going to go horseback riding. We're going to do all this stuff. And so I like went in the closet and there just happened to be like a cowboy hat and cowboy boots. So I like put it all on real quick and then took a pic. My wife took the picture and then I sent it to him. Like, I'm only riding horses with you if this is what we look like, and so that like, then if it was some one Christmas or whatever, I'm terrible at giving gifts, right? Me and my wife don't, we typically don't exchange gifts for anything. So I like just came up with the idea. I'm like, I'm going to go to Walmart.com and get a blanket made with that picture on it, and then I ordered like a couple coffee mugs too. I gave them out to like some of my wife's friends.
With the picture on it, or
yeah. So I can only imagine like some poor guy that works at Walmart Photo getting this email with all these pictures in it. But now like, so my friend Zach, who plays bass in Angel Dust, he stayed the night at my house for something, and as soon as he fell asleep, I put the blanket over top of him and made sure I took pictures of him and stuff with it, and
stuck him into bed. Yeah.
I'll be honest, I have no clue where it is now, but I definitely still have it.
Yeah.
And there's been a couple of times like my father-in-law has went to get a cup of coffee and grabbed that mug and doesn't even realize it till he's drinking out of it.
Yeah. Like the hope is that blanket doesn't get unraveled. And even if it gets donated or like, it will always be keeping someone warm.
Yeah, I want it draped over my coffin when I die.
Yeah, put an air tag on it. Make sure it like goes full circle for the rest of his life.
Right.
One of the last kind of more like off-topic questions. There's a photo of you that I found of you kind of like heart styling in front of like a tricked out Trix car.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Did you own said wheels, or did you thought it was just sick and post it up?
So the story behind that is I don't know if this is the appropriate thing to call it, but I think this is what it's actually called. In Myrtle Beach every year on some like Labor Day weekend or something, they have Black Bike Week.
Okay.
And it's this huge party, all these like crazy cars and bikes and stuff. And somehow my family ends up taking vacations there during that time. In that specific one, me and one of my friends were there, and I remember we were standing on the balcony of our hotel room, and we're looking out at this parking garage, and there's these three guys that are like staring at us. So we're very like, we're gonna go fuck these guys up, So we walk to we're pissed, you know what I mean? I don't know why we're so pissed. It just looks like they're fucking staring at us. So maybe I think it was that he parked his car there, and it looked like they were like surrounding his car. So we're like, okay, we got to go handle this, So we walk over there and we get up to his car, and there's nobody there. There was never anybody there. The people were vents. They were like these huge vents that looked like people.
Right.
So we went from like 100, like we're gonna fucking kill them, to we're retarded. You know what I mean? Like it's a vent, you know?
Am I gonna punch this vent out of just just for the sake of it, or
yeah? So then we like walk down, and this parking lot's just like filled with these cars, and I was like, you know what? I want to take a picture next to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when have you ever seen a tricks car? You know, with
the first time for
40-inch
me,
wheels. Yeah, they're huge down south though.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'd see them driving around, and they'd be like Frosted Flakes, any kind of different cereal.
Yeah. What cereals do you fuck with specifically?
I'm not a milk guy, right?
You're not a milk guy?
No, so I'll drink like chocolate milk. I love ice cream. Ice cream's my thing, but like, so I typically don't eat cereal.
So you can't do like the soup, the breakfast soup, essentially.
No, not a soup guy either. Hate soup. I don't know what it is, and my wife can insists on making soups like every week.
If you ever see someone who looks like Camden with like a bowl, it's probably not him.
It's not me. I'm not eating super cereal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm such a sucker for like some late night, like 9 o'clock carbs of just whatever cereal that we got and some milk, but not you.
No, I'll take a whole half gallon to the face, but of ice cream, but nah.
Yeah.
Not cereal.
Interesting. Well, yeah, the first time I've seen that Trix car, and I just this is the deep lore and research that I try to bring for these interviews.
Right.
So Camden, obviously, all the links for all the D-Block stuff will be in the show notes in the description. The very last question that I ask everyone before we start to wrap up the show officially is a favorite mosh story that you would like to share. So that's anything mosh worthy that you feel is first to your head, whether it's wholesome, gruesome, something that you did or just happened to you. That's how we start to end the show here.
Okay. So I've actually been stressing over this part. Only because I'm not going to say something that incriminates me.
Right. That's the first layer of stress, always.
Right. And as an older man, I probably moshed to like 3 songs in the past 5 years, maybe, all of which were Down for Mine by Purgatory. But the only one that comes to mind that is somewhat wholesome and kind of funny that revolves around us as a band, and this is before we were a band, our guitar player, Rich, so we used to have a fest that Critter from Antioch used to book every year in Detroit called Motor City Fest.
Right.
It was always like a big show for them specifically. It was like always kind of like a party for them.
Yeah.
And so they had just wrote, I don't know if it was right when Time came out or maybe right before that, but Rich played guitar in the band at the time, and he was moshing for, maybe it was Enemy of God, I think, and just snapped his arm and had to get rushed to the hospital and couldn't finish the show. So that's all I could think of.
Was it just loosey goosey, or
I just remember him holding it like this and running out.
Oh geez.
So yeah, so he couldn't play the show that night, and they had to get a fill-in.
Fill-in on the spot?
Well, it was their old guitar player, so they played older songs.
I see.
So
yeah.
So yeah, that's the only thing I could think of that doesn't incriminate anybody. It doesn't.
Yeah, I'm curious on people that come on the show. Like, what's more stressful, like the bev that you're checking or the mosh story that you're telling?
Well, I'll be honest. This is the second one I went through. Right, like the first one, I grabbed a bottle of cheer wine, and then I was like, because living 8 years in North Carolina, cheer wine is like water down there.
Of course, yeah.
So I was like, that's probably, and then I'm like, no, like I have to do Faygo. Like it's so Detroit that it's brainless. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Cheerwine's been checked on the show before, so I appreciate and I appreciate the attention to detail. Some people just hop I always don't give any people grief about it. It's more of the afterthought of like, you couldn't have gone to get a can of Red Bull and you're bringing tap water to the show. So, but everyone's bev interests. I always have to check myself because I'm a fucking nerd about this shit. Like I go to the grocery store and I see something I've never seen before, and I don't care about what it is with the flavoring. It's more about the excitement and the curiosity of it. But some people
Sure.
are like, yeah, I'll drink a Diet Coke. I'm like, I'm cool with that. So,
Yeah, I'm not a big soda guy. I usually am just a water guy, but when in Rome.
Yeah, when in Rome. Well, it's a high compliment to say being on this podcast is the equivalent of being in Rome. Like I said, Camden, all the links will be down below. Anything you want to plug,
Awesome.
shout out, or send the people off with before we go?
I not really. Support your local scene. That's it.
And listen to Olivia Rodrigo and eat pizza.
That's the one. If you know her, send her my way.
Dude, I'm waiting for that crossover to happen.
So I don't know how much time you got left, but so I don't know if you know who Stress the White Boy is. He's like a hip hop producer. He sent me the other day. He DM'd me asking for like the stems from The Fixer. And Matt is on tour right now with Citizen, so I can't get him the stems. And he's like, "Well, I have this program," and he like pulled all the vocals off of it and made like a rap song with them.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty fucking funny, but it's cool.
So are we gonna see that on a future D-Block release potentially?
I have no clue, but that might be the bridge that gets us to Olivia Rodrigo.
Yeah, do a little singing on it. Who knows?
Yeah, there it is.
Dude. Again, thank you so much for coming on. It was really awesome to, hear your story. And I hope that, I know there's been whispers and different considerations for D-Block coming through Western Canada, but I hope that happens sooner than later.
Yeah, me too. It's definitely somewhere we want to go.